Hello, dancers. Welcome back. And thus far in this course, we have tried to look at the major figures who brought forth modern dance from the turn of the century up into the 1930s and 40s. And during this same period, there were a few other figures that were also making an impressive amount of work. We will discuss a few of them today. Here. In New York City, there was Jose Limon, there was Anna Sokolow, there was Paul Taylor, and on the West Coast we had Lester Horton and Bella Lewitzky. I want to get into each of them individually. But like a stone sort of dropped into the cultural pool, the ripples created by modern dance by the 1940s really could be felt on the shores of education, fashion, could be really felt everywhere, like education in the 1940s. Let's see, some fashion and therapy, like art therapy, dance therapy. But by the 1940s, modern dance was a fact of life in America. Young people in the schools and the colleges were learning creative rhythms that were adapted from modern dance systems. Broadway musical shows, movies, nightclub reviews, and eventually TV all showed the imprint of modern dance. In psychiatric hospitals, expressive movement was tried as a means of releasing patients' pent-up emotions. Religious conferences offered dance as a means of collective worship. The moving forces behind these movements were the dozens, and then even beyond them, hundreds of followers of each of the people that we've discussed so far in this class. And the hundreds of people who learned from those people were inspired from afar. The people became modern dancers to become choreographers. And in this way, each modern dance company then becomes a breeding ground for new choreographers who break away from their own individual styles, companies, or schools. So when we meet a choreographer, it's of great interest to us to trace where they trained and who their influences were. So it's important to know these things. So you get lots of these, you have like a family tree that develops. One person influences another. Isadora Duncan to St. Denis. We just go all the way up and through, and it continues on and branches out. Now, here's an example. Martha Hill. Now, this is Martha Hill, and she danced with Martha Graham from 1929 to 1931. And then she went on to do a great job, and she's the one that started the school at Bennington, the summer training program where Martha Graham, Doris Humphrey, Charles Weidman, Hanya Holm all taught and spread modern dance onward. Now, we've talked about that already. Martha Hill also went on to start the Juilliard School. And then this is another example, Pauline Kohner. Now, beautiful dancer who danced with Michio Ito in Los Angeles, also in New York, and toured with him across the country from New York all the way to LA. She danced with Jose Limon. She danced with Jose Limon, and she also danced with Doris Humphrey. And she went on to direct the dance studies at at North Carolina School of the Arts, and really got that program off the ground. Pauline Kohner is her name. Fascinating individual. Now, I want to just talk about. Now, let's dig into these five individuals that I really want to talk about. It's important to trace our lineage like that. I trace my own lineage in this way. I dance professionally with Bella Lewitzky. Lewitzky danced with Lester Horton. Horton danced with Michio Ito. And now you're really like in this chain. There's many other artists working during this time, and I can only choose to look at a few of them due to our time constraints. And I'm just scratching the surface of the people I am mentioning. But the field of modern dance in America at this time is full and is rich with interesting personalities and inspiring people. And I want to encourage you to dig deeper and to look at the lives of the people that I mentioned, but also the lives that I'm sort of skipping over here just due to time constraints. There's great work being done. And what I'm talking about now is just a few examples. This is José Limon. José Limon was born in Mexico, and he came with his family to the United States when he was a little boy. But he never lost his attachment to the Spanish-Mexican styles of his art. This is, let's go here. Yeah. Discipline, yeah. So for Limon, choreography demanded formally disciplined treatment of movement themes. Yeah. So there was a formal structure to his dances. There were things that he wanted to see and to do and to follow this script. When he performed for Doris Humphrey, he was hailed by critics and public as the leading male dancer of American modern dance. And from the 1940s to the 1950s, he was one of the greatest choreographers of the field. This piece, Pavan, which is here, I'll show it to you in a minute. It's his masterpiece. We'll talk about that in a minute, but it's really a 20-minute ballet with only 4 dancers. And it was produced in the repertories of the American Ballet Theatre, the Royal Danish Ballet, the Royal Swedish Ballet, the Joffrey Ballet, the National Ballet of Canada, on and on. So this is his masterwork, and it has been performed all over the world. Set to Purcell's music, the Pavan is a dance form of pompous and proud steps that sort of trace back to the strictly formal court life in Spain during the Inquisition. It's based on Shakespeare's Othello, concerning a jealous, plotting court and a passionate love and a murder to avenge dishonor. The setting is in Renaissance Italy. Structure is A, B, A, B, A. It's a formalist structured piece. Now, Limon's movement style is known by this proud carriage of the torso, the arms, the head that reflects this Spanish heritage. He started out trying to be a painter. After a short stay at UCLA, he went on to New York to study painting further. And that's where he saw Harold Kreutzberg from Germany performing modern dance, and he was inspired. And by the time he joined the Humphrey Weidman Company in 1930, he was already 22 years old, and he had to work really hard to achieve balance and coordination that was required of their company. But by 1931, he was already choreographing. He had an insatiable, mind for choreography. He'd go on to dance with the Humphrey Weidman Company for about 10 years. And by 1937, he won this scholarship to Bennington College to dance, the dance school, where he produced a work, his first really group work, called Dance of Death. It was his first major work. And then when World War II broke out, he was drafted into the army, where he was placed in special services as an entertainer. He didn't like entertaining. To him, dance was a very powerful art form. It wasn't something for entertainment. But after the army service in 1946, he came back to ballet classics and to get back into shape and to back into reconnecting with the Humphrey Weidman Company. But he went on to choreograph more and more on his own. Now, Pauline Lawrence, someone whom he had worked with, came out and married him, and she helped him organize his company with some of wonderful artists. He formed the José Limon Company using the principles of weight and fall and recovery that were developed as a technique closely linked to the Humphrey Weidman style. If you remember our talk from Doris Humphrey, in 1946, when Doris Humphrey was in despair over not being able to continue dancing due to her arthritis, it was Pauline Lawrence who really encouraged her to continue choreographing and working with José Limon. Humphrey became the artistic director and co-choreographer of the José Limon Dance Company there at its founding in 1946. And Limon danced in the company and also choreographed for it while he was sort of developing his own technique. He taught dance at Bennington College, at Sarah Lawrence College, at Connecticut College, and at the Juilliard School Dance Division. He provided a strong role model for men in modern dance. His choreographic works were usually based on literary themes that translated the emotional high points into a really physical form. So he was really based in narrative a lot, telling a story. Two of his more significant works are here. I talked about the first one, the Moor's Pavan, 1949, and then another one is called There's a Time, which is based on, here's José Limon. This is from the Moor's Pavan, and this is José Limon dancing in the piece. And then we move on to There is a Time. This is based on Ecclesiastes from the Bible. To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under the sun. And this is a group work based on that poem. All right. Great artist. Okay, Anna Sokolow. Born in Hartford, Connecticut, but raised in New York City on the Lower East Side. She studied dance at the neighborhood playhouse where Alwyn Nicolai would go on to become the artistic director. But she was studying there. But she found her inspiration and direction in life, really, from Martha Graham. Anna Sokolow joined the Martha Graham Dance Company in 1930. And she danced for Martha for 8 years. And she was Louis Horst's teaching assistant when he began teaching composition. We've talked about that. And when she started making her work, which was done really as early as 1934, there was a piece called Death of Tradition. In this piece, she expressed her anger at social injustice. And this is really something that would never disappear from her work. Social justice was really what she was focused on. In 1938, she traveled to the Soviet Union and she performed several solo concerts across the country. Anna Sokolow's style is ironic, it's subtle, it's grim. She was a woman of deep social conscience who was unafraid to translate her convictions into powerful choreography. Her works often reflect the human condition and sense of loneliness and isolation and despair about human relationships that aren't working out. I mean, although her works really blend drama and dance, they have no real endings. They just simply stop or fade out. I mean, since she believed there are no final solutions. She believed art must relate to its times and movement comes from emotional imagery. Some of the work that she did, here, this is her. That's her powerful, amazing dancer. This is her dancing. Now this piece here is Dreams, and set in 1961. Anna Sokolow's indictment of Nazi Germany. Picture a series of nightmarish scenes presented with forceful, dramatic impact, to the accompaniment of Bach and utterances of horror, human horror. A girl in white climbs compulsively over an unending line of bodies. People run desperately, trying to escape, to no avail. People clutch at each other, scream silently, and fall. It's a harrowing piece. Tough work. Another piece, not this one, but there's another piece called Lyric Suite, which is in that same vein, 1953, performed to a really harsh score by Alan Berg, made up of 4 solos expressing introspective sorrow, fear, twitching anxiety, lonesome defiance, a duet of unsure love, and a quartet of lyrical symmetry. So that's Lyric Suite. It's a tough piece, it's the lonesome feeling kind of work. Now, this piece that I've pictured here is from Rooms, which I think is very apt for this COVID era. But Rooms was set in 1955. It's a piece of social distancing and social isolation. A group of 8 men and women, but they're not actually a group. Each person is alone, imprisoned in their own self and grappling with their own psychological demons. The stage is set with 8 chairs, each dancer in isolation on a chair, a private prison or a lonely apartment in New York City. The solitude is present even in a duet where there's a man and a woman. They try to break through and to reach to each other, but they can't. It's unfulfilled. She also went on to choreograph for the Broadway stage. Annie, Get Your Gun, Fanny, and Plain and Fancy were all works of hers. Let me go back. I'm not quite done with Anna Sokolow here. Yeah. Plain and Fancy. Yeah, Annie, Get Your Gun, Plain and Fancy, Fanny. Anna Sokolow, life is really not a bowl of cherries for her. She feels life is no utopia, and so why delude ourselves? She was intent on showing the truth about pain. Like Limon, she wanted her work to have a structure, a technique, and content behind it. The work needs to grow as an organic whole, with each part in relation to each other and to the principles of this thematic statement, development, and resolution. So she builds an arc of the work. Content is her reason for doing any piece, like the idea, the music, the poetry, the Bible, or play. She starts with the concept, not a blueprint, but she gives her dancers this verbal imagery, and then she tries to make the action fit her concept. So she really worked in that manner. Anna Sokolow had a career of over 30 years as a choreographer in both here in the United States, but also Israel was a place where she continued to work as well. Made some really stunning work. Paul Taylor, known for his humorous and inventive choreography. He grew up near Washington, D.C., and studied art in college. Yeah, this is Paul. And later he changed his focus to dance, from art, painting, to dance. In the late 1940s, he studied at Juilliard. And then in 1954, Taylor formed a small company of dancers and began presenting his works. And a year later, he joined the Martha Graham Dance Company. So he was already choreographing when he joined the Martha Graham Dance Company. And he danced there with Martha for 7 years while he continued to make work for his own company. So he was doing those two things concurrently. Then in 1960, he really formalized the Paul Taylor Dance Company and had a great gig because he went on his first international tour with his company. He continued to perform with the company until 1975, but he continued to choreograph and direct his company until his dying day. He received numerous awards, including a Kennedy Center Honors, the National Medal of Arts, and an Emmy for Speaking in Tongues, which was choreographed in 1988, where he tackles a theme of like good and evil and transforms it with this dramatic suspense. Okay, so Taylor's style, he often uses classical music for his choreography, which sometimes has a humorous tend to make some music, but he tends to make movement that mirrors the music with classical proportions and with grace, and sometimes with humor. His work ranged from pure dance pieces to dramatic portrayals of good and evil. He works with all kinds of themes. You never know what you're going to get with a Paul Taylor piece when you go see a concert, because it could be all kinds of things. And some of the works have Americana themes, and he frequently uses a sense of humor or satire or mockery of social or historical events. His movement style is unique. It's a synergy of this light, balletic, springing movements with glimpses of the contracting Graham technique. So it's the beautiful blend of all of those things. His choreography had a great influence on many of the dancers who worked with him in the next generation. His pieces have his company, and dancers can do anything. They're amazing. This piece, Esplanade, this is a masterpiece that he created right after he stopped performing. So in 1975, this piece was created, and he retired from performing when he was age 44, and the success of this piece really confirmed that his company could survive without him as a performer in it. Esplanade is an outdoor area to walk, a place to walk and see nature. And this piece that he created is really all about walking and running and skipping and moving from a slow stroll to this like all-out physical exuberance. It's full of joyous naturalism, relaxed wandering around, to these like dramatic jumps and athletic leaps and like daring, risk-taking leaps, but then also like slowly strolling across the floor. It's a beautiful work, and Paul Taylor's works are like that. There's this beautiful naturalism and humanity that comes across in his works, and his works are enduring and it's just wonderful to see. So I hope you'll get a chance to look at the videos that I've posted for you. Yeah. Now let's move over to the West Coast, where we have Lester Horton. In our discussion of modern dance, we've been talking really about New York, primarily. All those other dancers in New York. Now, this is Lester Horton. Living in Los Angeles, and he was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, and he loved Native American culture and sort of the spirit of the Wild West. It was actually at a Wild West show that he first saw Native American tribal dancing, and it got him interested in dance as a cultural art form. And he studied ballet for a few years, but he was not really a dancer per se. His movement and expressive range was limited, but his imagination was not. In 1928, he moved to Los Angeles, and that's where he danced with Michio Ito's company. He even performed in At the Hawk's Well, the signature piece that Michio Ito did with Yates and Pound, and Lester Horton danced the leading role in that piece. He also choreographed while he was in Los Angeles. He started choreographing and designing and creating, and there were outdoor pageants. He did nightclub reviews ultimately, and even movie musicals. So he had a long career, and was willing to entertain and willing to make work and willing to create all kinds of work of a theatrical perspective, like a total theater. His choreography was really like choreo dramas. So in 1932, he started a company to present works depicting Native American, African American, Mexican, Haitian, Japanese cultures. He called it the Lester Horton Dancers, but then it would also be called the Lester Horton California Ballet, and it was also called the Horton Dance Group. So in other words, he was flexible and changeable. He didn't like to be pinned down with anything. In 1942, he formed the Horton Dance Theater School, which continued to go on until his passing. And his was the first integrated dance company that included Mexican American, African American, Japanese, and Caucasian dancers. This was really one of the first integrated dance companies in the United States. His choreographic style was similar to him. He was changeable and restless and variable. He never settled into one style. Early on, he started training dancers, though, and he developed the Horton dance technique that requires this really strong torso and legs. And Bella Lewitzky, who we'll talk about here in a minute, Bella helped him develop and codify his Horton technique in the 1950s. And this technique builds strong, versatile dancers, the people that he wanted to work with. Thematically, his choreography is related to social activism, where he made, like I was saying, choreo drama. So it was choreography that melded dance and drama. So there were narrative-based works. His productions required costuming and decor that he made and he created. He created the sets, he created the costumes, he created the lighting, he created the choreography. It was a total theater experience that he was putting together. There are a few pieces that he created, like he's created cumbia, which was this slow sort of piece of various Panamanian influence to it. Kathak, a various like Eastern Indian piece. Blues, which was a relaxed piece. Listeria, which had like Aztec themes. Voodoo, and Chinese fantasy. He had created all kinds of works. He created a Rite of Spring, which is one of those pieces. Rite of Spring is kind of a famous work that a lot of choreographers try to do. But this one was set in the Hollywood Bowl with Bella Lewitzky as the chosen one. And it caused a huge storm of protest when it was labeled obscene because of the sexual and angular movements, the dancers in their bare feet. When it was first set, the Rite of Spring was originally set with not by Horton, but has been done many times over and over again. You know, the one piece that I think that makes Horton one of the pieces that is the most famous of Horton's is this one, Beloved, set in 1948. Oh, it was really about it came from an inspiration of a newspaper article where he read that a man suspected his wife of adultery and he beat her to death with a Bible. Yeah, and this is an image from that work. Bella Lewitzky starred in that piece. This is not Bella, but in 1948. So this is probably his most famous work. Also Salome, which was also based on a biblical theme. But when he did set work, the thing I want to get across is that Horton was changeable, and when he set work, he changed things up for his choreography and for his company. He changed the names of the pieces. He changed the music. He changed the movement phrases within the works, to the point where the company members were confused as to which dance they were doing in any given performance. It was like, so he mixed things up and was always continuing to like tinker and work with the pieces. Well, could you just change this? Could you move that around? His choreography was never set. He was open to new ideas, and he wanted to explore the possibilities for movement ideas. And he used his partner, Bella Lewitzky, to sort of define what those ideas were. He would ask Bella, can you go into the next room? He would say, Bella, can you do this with the body? Can you like make it into a tabletop, standing on one leg? And she'd say, I don't know, I'll go figure it out. And she'd not only figure out how to do it, but how to get into it and get out of it safely. And so she codified that technique and figured it out for him. Now today, there's no Horton repertory that can be passed down and remembered. Like everything changed all the time. Each season brought something new. His company performed in big theaters and also in like teeny tiny nightclubs. He did choreography also for about like 16 different Hollywood films. He was prolific. And he influenced a whole generation of dancers who'd go on to pass on what they were learning from Horton to their students and their followers. He had passion, and it was contagious. And his dancers, long after working with him, referred to him as a magical, wonderful role model and someone to imitate. They loved working with Lester Horton. Horton was talented, he was versatile, he was a magnetic figure who just sort of cast a spell on everyone around him. He was curious, he was excited about design materials and fabric and feathers and yarn and dyes and drums and percussion devices and lighting, and a born teacher, and he had an enthusiastic personality. One of his main dancers was Alvin Ailey, and Alvin would go on to talk about him and what a great influence he had on him for years and years to come. Horton's vision of art was inspiring and grand. His was one of the first interracial dance companies. He had Native Americans, Mexican Americans, he had African Americans, all came to his theater and taught for him and performed in his company. He set an example for a harmonious community and a melting pot of creativity. His insatiable appetite for creation led to a lack of discipline and instability, and he had a lot of depression that he dealt with, so it wasn't all rosy with Lester Horton. He had an unfocused personality, and he turned a lot to alcohol and abused his body, really, and his stores of energy. And he had a heart attack at age 47, and died. He died far too young. This is The Beloved. This very, very powerful work. I think I have posted when Bella Lewitzky was trying to reconstruct this with Diana and John Pennington. So I think there's some of that you'll be able to see. This is Bella Lewitzky in Salome, performing at the Hollywood Bowl, performing the work. This would be one of her signature works that of Lester Horton's choreography. It was one of the pieces that really was inspiring for her and launched her career as a performer. Let's talk about Bella Lewitzky. So this is Bella. And Bella Lewitzky was born in a utopian socialistic desert colony that was engaged in sort of an experiment of cooperative living. They shared everything in this community. Strong sense of idealism that never left her. It was a part of who she was, this utopian idealism. And she started studying with Lester Horton in Los Angeles at the Norma Gold studio. By 1934, she had left. So she started studying with him in Los Angeles and became the company's lead dancer and Lester Horton's muse, really. As I mentioned, she really helped to codify the Horton technique. And by 1934, she had joined his company and was really his leading dancer and his instrument. She organized his ideas into these concrete movement concepts. She codified that technique, and she brought a first-rate performing quality to his choreography. She could understand what he wanted, and she could produce it physically, and she could explain it to others. She was clear. She was precise in all the ways that Lester Horton was not. So they balanced each other. And through her, he realized his choreographic vision. And it was through her mind that he established his technique. A style that would allow dancers to be prepared to perform any movement sequences that they might be required to perform in any style. It was really a solid technique. The technique has its qualities. It produces dancers that have legs and backs of steel. Dancers that are good with falls, good with turns, good with aerial movements. In particular, they're able to descend into and rise out of the floor with surprising ease. And Bella taught the technique she taught the technique, and she was also the main demonstrator of it. And people would say, if Bella can't do it, then it can't be done. She was a powerhouse, literally. And she was all of 4'11". She was not, I don't even think she was even 5 foot tall, but she was solid and an amazing dynamic performer. Bella taught the technique. Oh my gosh. And her relationship with Lester Horton, their personalities were so different. And so there were some ups and there were some downs. It wasn't all rosy between them. It had its share of their relationship had its share of rough spots. Their personalities, like I said, were opposites. He was wildly creative and an inventor, and she was disciplined and focused and organized and a perfectionist. He wanted to fill the stage with large groups of excited people, and she wanted a small, finely tuned, well-trained company of soloists, and that's what she had. In the company, we were just soloists, really. Everyone, she made a point of mentioning that every one of her dancers were soloists. So she really worked. And was very much a perfectionist. I remember when I was in the company and I was learning the roles. I was stepping into somebody's role, a man who had just left the company. And I was learning these roles, and I turned to one of the dancers who had been there for many years, and I said, so how do you want me to do this part right here? And Bella overheard me saying that and asking that question. She said, "Oh no, Tim. Don't ever ask, how do you want it to be? The question you should be asking is, how should it be?" And I'm like, oh, okay, okay. So she was very specific, very, like, thank you. Thanks, Bella. It was great. She was amazing. In 1940, she married Newell Reynolds. Newell was an architect. He was also a dancer in the Horton Company, and together they danced in Romeo and Juliet, which Horton choreographed for them. And like I mentioned, and they built. So yeah. So they married. She married Newell, and when World War II broke out in the 1940s, the men in the Horton Dance Company were drafted into the Army or the Marine Corps, Air Force. They were drafted in the military, and Horton started taking jobs at night clubs. I mentioned that, he was asking his company members to perform in nightclubs, and Bella thought this was a sellout. She didn't like it at all. In 1944, though, she injured her foot, and she couldn't continue to dance, so she moved to Chicago to be near her husband, who was stationed there in the Navy. This was the first time that Lewitzky really physically split from Horton. Newell and Bella eventually moved back to Los Angeles to work with Horton again, and this time in hopes of realizing a long-term dream, and that was of founding a permanent home for the Dance Theater School and Company. So in 1946, Lewitzky, Horton, Reynolds, and a man named William Bone founded the Dance Theater of Los Angeles. It was a school and a company that was daring, both in being multiracial and in its theme and the themes it took on, such as anti-Semitism, adultery, and religious extremism. In 1948, like 2 years after its founding, the dance theater opened with a season of these pieces. The fourth version of Salome, which was Horton's choreography, and one of Bella's famous roles. There was a piece called Total Incarnation, which was based on Native American coming-of-age rituals with lavish costumes and props. There was The Beloved, the dance drama I talked about before, about the man who beat his wife with a Bible because of her suspected adultery. And it was a huge success. Then also 1950, this is when Bella was 35 years old, and this was her final break away from Lester Horton for the last time. She was on her own, and Bella taught children and adults. She continued to perform and to choreograph independently. In the early 1950s, yeah. But early 1950, so 1951, there was an anonymous tip-off that alleged that Bella, remember this socialist desert colony that she had been a part of, and her parents as immigrants from Russia, she was summoned because it was alleged that she might be a member of the Communist Party. And so she was subpoenaed by the U.S. House Committee on Un-American Activities to answer questions regarding her communist activities in the arts. And she wanted to, they demanded, it was a witch hunt is what it was, and they wanted to know who in the artist community that she was involved with was communistic. She refused to name names and refused to cooperate with this committee on Un-American Activities. And she famously declared to them, Bella said, I am a dancer. I'm not a singer. So this led to her being briefly blacklisted from choreographing for movies, which had been providing a lucrative addition to her income, but it was a famous, she stood up to this witch hunt, really. In 1955, Bella and Newell had a daughter named Nora Elizabeth Reynolds, and this helped Bella to sort of shift her interests from performing to more teaching. And she devised a program for teaching teachers how to teach children subjects that they were studying in schools, like social studies and math and history, through movement. When I joined the company, she was still doing this. We would still go to colleges and universities, and we would also teach teachers how to teach subjects like math and social studies and that sort of thing. It was based on Bella's techniques of doing that. Lewitzky taught dance at several academic institutions, including California Institute for the Arts, the Idlewild School for Music and the Arts. She continued teaching at Idlewild until 1972. Her daughter Nora then joined the faculty there in 2003 and still teaches the Lewitzky technique there today. In 1969, Bella founded the dance program at Cowart in Valencia, California. So she had a long history there, in academia, teaching, as well as performing professionally. And then in 1966, she formed the Bella Lewitzky Dance Company and continued dancing with her company under her direction. And one of my former teachers danced in the company early on like that. And he described her as a powerhouse, and being able to, like, the balance that she had, her performance quality was amazing. Her ability to stand on one leg and, and to move dynamically into and out of the floor, she was just an amazing and captivating performer. Under her direction, the Lewitzky Dance Company became one of the leading international modern dance companies in the world. Every year it performed nationally and internationally. Known for her emotionally evocative choreography, her outstanding mastery of technique, and her concern over the welfare of her dancers, that was something very important to her. Oftentimes when we would go on tour, at the end of a performance, right at the very end of the curtains close, there's the applause at the end, the curtains close, and then, like, the audience members get up and start to walk out, or they may want a talk back, or they may want some kind of a, the reporters come up to talk to the choreographer. They want to talk to Bella, but Bella wouldn't have it. She just wouldn't. She would want to make sure her dancers got a cool down, and so the whole company would do a cool down on stage behind the closed curtain, and she would lead us through a cool down ritual, in a sense, that would take about 10 minutes, and then 10-15 minutes of cooling us down as a company, closing the event together, and then she would go off and talk to the press or whatever. So she was really concerned for the welfare of her dancers. No obscenity, 1990. In 1990, this is like nearly 4 decades after she talked back to the House Red Baiters. Bella Lewitzky crossed out an anti-obscenity clause in a grant. She had been awarded a grant for $72,000 by the National Endowment for the Arts. But the recipients of the grant had to promise not to create any work that might be seen as obscene. And she looked at that and said, no way. She argued that while she had never made or created any works that ever could be considered obscene, she just felt like, on principle, that it was unconstitutional to try for the government to try to restrict artists' freedom of expression. And so she sued. And a federal court agreed. So what happens is she crossed out the anti-insanity clause and said, no, I'm not going to sign that, and sent it back. And they said, okay, well, we're not going to give you the $72,000. And she said, oh, yes, you are. You've awarded it to me, and I'm going to sue you to get it back. And she did. And a federal court agreed with her and struck down the anti-obscenity clause. I mean, she eventually had to sue the NEA chairman, John Frohnmeyer, to have the grant reinstated. But she did. And she won. Amazing. Tenacity. Oh my gosh. And she was a powerhouse. Now, I joined the company in 1995 when Bella was about to turn 80 years old. She was still teaching technique and getting physical, almost 80 years old, getting physical in the dance studio. This dance studio that her husband Newell, the architect, had built just outside their living room of their home in the Hollywood Hills. With her company, we toured nationally and internationally. I will never forget my time with her. She was sharp as a tack and a force to be reckoned with. But I'm ever grateful for the time I spent in her company. Her company disbanded shortly after I left, and she didn't want a dinosaur company that would go on to carry on her works. I remember we were on a plane flying to a performance, I think probably in Germany, and I was asking her about, she had made an announcement that she was going to be canceling her company after another year, and I said, there was some company members there who had been dancing with her for over 20 years, and I was assuming that they might be able to take the reins, and I was just asking her about that, and she said no. She felt that dance companies were products of their age, and that they reflected the issues and thoughts of the era in which the choreography lived. And she said, no, she's lived her life. She made her work during the time in which she lived, and she didn't see any need to carry it on afterward. So she told me, I don't want a dinosaur company carrying on my work. So, okay, but I feel like I didn't agree. I feel like it's important, and I feel like it would be great for people to see this work of hers. But, Bella has her opinions and is who she is. This was a piece called Spaces in Between that we danced. And this was one called Confines, which had a lot of set pieces. Rudy Gernreich had been a dancer in the Lester Horton Company. Also became a set designer and fashion designer. I believe this was one of his costumes, and I believe that this is his set as well. So continue to work with, and this is another one of his costumes. Continue to work with her for many, many years. This is a piece I danced in many called Turf, based off of there were the riots in Los Angeles, and this was really a piece based off of that kind of those notions of riots and turf wars. And I'll leave with a couple of quotes here from Bella. She said, "To move freely, you must be deeply rooted." She told me once, you have to know something about something in order to branch out and do other things. So you have to really, in order to be free to do or think or feel or move freely the way you want to, you have to be rooted and grounded in something. So her dancers and her technique was grounded in strength. I had come from a tradition of much more kind of release technique, but hers was strength and shape and form. And she said that when she was helping me, it was all about, you have to ground yourself in the strength of this technique so that you can then move freely in your release technique. And I completely agree with her. Another quote is here: I've been struggling in dance for, this should say 28 years, not 8 years, sorry. To exist merely is to exist stupidly. But to exist to make art is a pretty grand act. Yeah, I think that's true. That's true. Bella Lewitzky. This is the way I remember her. And next week, we're delving into postmodern dance. So I'm looking forward to that, and I will talk to you next week.